Welcome to a new episode of the Creative Industry Insight podcast. I'm your host, Bobby. Today, we welcome directors Dylan Redford and Harrison Fishman, who join us to talk about their work on Neighbours. Dylan and Harrison will talk us through how they crafted each episode of the docuseries. Please be warned there are heavy spoilers in this episode. Now let's jump into the conversation with Dylan and Harrison. Hi Dylan, hi Harrison. Thank you for joining me today.
So happy to be here.
Thanks for having us, Robert.
We're here to talk about HBO/A24 produced Neighbours, which has come out recently on HBO Max in the UK. I have to be really careful with what I say regarding Neighbours because it's like an Australian long-running TV show. I don't want people to be like confusing between the two, to think like what's going on here. Before we jump into the project, how have you found the reception to the docuseries?
It's been really positive. It's been really positive, and I think, obviously, when you make something, you want you want people to like it, obviously, but I think you also hope that it has an audience, and that audience. I think for us, I think me and Harrison definitely make the show like for each other and for our friends first and foremost when we're just thinking about how we want to go about it. But I think also we hope and wanted it to have a wide audience and to be able to speak to kind of as many people as we could, have the biggest kind of umbrella. And there's a lot of things in the show that we really care a lot about, that we were really excited about, that motivated us to make it. But we also tried to make it as layered as possible so that it could really have a big audience and a big tent. And from what we've seen, I think that it's kind of what happened, and we're just kind of like pinching ourselves that we managed to pull that off. Two kind of like sculptor artists who made videos online ended up making a show that a lot of people want to watch, which we're very grateful for, and feel very humbled by.
Yeah, I feel like we were like surprised by. I think we always obviously wanted the show to do well and to be received by a wider audience, but I think, I don't think that I think we just had very little expectations because this is the first time that we made a show. And so I think just everything has been incredible. And anybody that wants us to talk about the show, we feel very grateful for. That's why we're happy that you reached out, Robert,
Totally.
and just being able to, it's been incredible. We didn't think it was going to be that people were going to watch it. Well, I don't know. We thought people were going to watch it, but not this many. So it's cool.
Yeah, not this many for sure.
I think sometimes you just can't judge something, right? Like when you're in the thick of it and you're making something, I always found that you can never actually understand if it's going to be good or not, just because there's so many twists and turns, especially with like a docuseries, with like a narrative TV show or film. That's something that's like written, it's taking time. They'll do a previs, they'll do rehearsals, they'll do stunt rehearsals, they'll do all these set builds. But when you're doing a docuseries where you want to fly on the wall of some of these people's lives and you don't know what you're really going to get with them each day, especially if you filmed it over a number of years, where I guess this phrase would be like, you give someone enough rope, they'll hang themselves. So they'll kind of, and things escalate a lot in the show when you think like, well, this has given me a new appreciation of my neighbors. Like the worst thing my neighbor did was pop our football because we kicked it onto his grass. And it's like, but here you got people like arguing and potentially putting guns on each other, and it's just insane.
Yeah, totally. I think it's funny. I remember, right? We've been, we wanted to make a show that was very entertaining, very funny, and also that had a feeling of danger embedded within it. Because I think that, for better or for worse, like people, I think today are sort of like jaded to media in a way, and like there's a lot of question around what's real and what's fake. And I think that we were just becoming obsessed with trying to show the most real and wild stuff that we could basically, put on camera and explore. And I think right before we put it out, I remember we were like, damn, like, is this a crazy time to put out the show? Like, we didn't think that we didn't know how the country, I think America specifically, was going to take the show, because it's a bit of a divisive time. And so, yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like I've come to believe it's kind of a similar effect to why people like being in, like why people like watching horror movies. It's like they are just so happy that it's not happening to them. And I think that there's like something to that in terms of the show. Like I think it does make people appreciate the neighbors that they have, and they can kind of vicariously be like, well, I'm glad that this is not happening to me and that I'm not, and also, by virtue of that, kind of project themselves onto the situation. How would they handle it? How would they navigate it? Who do they connect to? Who do they not? Which I think like that, to what you were saying, like the making a show like this, especially in the early stages, like, we're very grateful that, HBO and A24 took such a swing on the show and with us. And I remember talking to various people when we were developing it, and they were like, well, where's the celebrity? Like, you're going to have a celebrity host or celebrity voiceover, or, it's like we didn't have any of that stuff. We just had normal people. And so, that's like, especially in this climate, it was, I think, at any other network or any other place, it'd be a much harder pitch. But they were kind of like, well, the tone, it's comedic and it's open, and also it's about something that a lot of people experience. Like, we don't have a celebrity face to this, but we do have something that is universal, which is like everyone has a neighbor. So, and everyone kind of, when you're in a neighbor dispute, it's the only thing you want to talk about. And so they were like, I think there's enough here that I think, we don't need a celebrity. We don't need any of that kind of like zeitgeisty industry extra push to get people to want to watch this. I think people just want to see other real people dealing with something that a lot of people have, just neighbors.
Yeah, and I think even if you had like the voiceover, it would be too on the nose, right? Like you would have it, you might as well then point the camera at yourselves at the same time when something crazy happens, to then have like that office style reaction of like, did you just see that? Like I would have loved to see your reaction though when I think it's episode 3 with the grass where lady pulls out the gun. It's like, is it loaded? I don't know. And it's like it's like there's like, whoa, like, okay, this is serious because no one wants that going off.
Right. Yeah, I think it's funny. I think that like by not having a narrator, I think it puts the viewer in a bit more of an uneasy place. And I think that's part of like the exciting part of our show, because like if there was a narrator, it's like you're kind of safe back with the narrator when they talk, or with the host. But with this, you're kind of dropped into this thing, and you're just sort of, you have to, as a viewer, kind of like dissect it and fend for yourself in a way, which I think was always really just an exciting thing for us. And it was a risk, I think, like what Dylan was saying to some degree,
Yeah, and I think as well, like there's certain things that you read online where people say like, surely these are people playing up to their characters, which they might do because camera's there, but they're also trying to make their point on like what they're battling on, because everybody's going to be such a bull in a china shop when it comes to their point of view, especially if they're going to be right. But what I think the documentary does quite well is like, it doesn't, I don't think you guys make them as like caricatures of people. You kind of give each person their say of like what the issue is, and they kind of just take it and lead from it. I can imagine if you're watching footage back and editing, it could be very easy to make these people like be quite disrespectful towards them by making them look like clowns, really. But whilst you're capturing the footage, and then also an edit, how do you go about crafting their stories and sculpting it so that they come off maybe not in a good light, but in a way that it's like they can show off their personality and characters.
It's a great question. Well, I think it all like really stems from us getting to know everyone we film with, and like just trying to get to know them as best as possible and becoming very close with them to the point where like, I think when we are editing, we are trying to show them as they really are, and I think we build trust with everyone we film with, and we never want to do anything that does them dirty, like we sometimes say. We're like, there are times when we start to do edits and we're like, you know what, this is like almost like it starts to become like unfair or something, and starts to sway the story in a way that maybe it wasn't actually there. So I think like I think a lot of it comes from just trying to a lot of it comes from being also just very close to the people that we film with and not wanting to do them wrong.
Yeah, and I think a big part of like one of the things that we really focus on in how we make the show is that we tend to really only show like this isn't a prank show. Like it's not like we're not tricking anyone into being on it. And so we really focus on making sure that like everything that we show are things that our subjects are wanting to show and talking very forwardly about. And so, you might as a viewer think what they're saying is crazy or whatever, but ultimately what they're saying is exactly what they want on camera. Like what they're doing and what they're saying, they know that the camera's there, they believe it, and they want to be heard and they want to be seen. And so I think oftentimes, some of the doc stuff gets kind of tricky when anytime you start just like sort of tricking your subject into saying things that they didn't mean to say or regret saying, or you got them in a situation where they acted in a way where they didn't feel like they were being themselves. Like we really focus and put a lot of energy to what Harrison is saying. It's like making our subjects feel like they can be totally themselves on camera. And then, it's why most of our subjects love the show. It's because when they watch it, they are seeing themselves. They're saying exactly the person that they want to be and exactly the person that they were on camera. So I think there were times where we found out about something or we knew something, but they never told us about it, or we had knowledge of something that they didn't, and we didn't pursue that edit, or we didn't pursue that part of the narrative because that felt like a gotcha. That felt like something where we were turning them into a joke. So I think that approach, I think, does really, help mitigate that sort of feeling of turning them into, that you're always kind of like laughing at their expense.
And I can imagine as well that like it could be so easy once you have those information and do the gotcha sort of thing. It could be so easy just to throw that in whoever's face to be like, you don't know this or you don't know that, and so on
Totally.
and so forth. And I think as well, you don't want to be that person, because then you're kind of stoking the fire for your own entertainment to capture their reaction and
Yeah.
like basically baiting them.
Baiting. Yeah, totally.
But there's also like just what some of the stuff that you see is just, it's, I don't know, I'm just like amazed. But then also you get like the balance between the people that like sometimes, I think it's even in the first episode with Seth and Josh, they're arguing about the legal rights of where the gate could be placed. But I think it's what Seth says, actually, we've got so much in common, both do Dungeons and Dragons and same things. It's literally, if that gate wasn't the problem, we'd probably be best friends.
Yeah.
Totally.
And it's like stuff like that where you think, wow, you're arguing over something, but actually you could end up being quite good friends. But then on the other end of the scale, we've got somebody like Jeff and how he sort of approaches Alexa's 18-foot wall, which, it looks horrible, but then also somebody's property, they could do what they want. And he's very vocal. And I think his favorite line is always like, it looks like something Osama bin Laden was staying in Pakistan in that compound. And you think, okay, like what are you trying to insinuate here? But then there's so many different things, and it's also the point of views, and that's what I like as well, is the point of views that people have. And even when you have the like Trevor raising his livestock, which like anybody would be like, why would you do that? That like livestock creates so much like noise. I think even keeping chickens, because I was thinking of having some chickens at the end of my garden, and then somebody said you don't want to do that because they attract rats, and it's like,
Right.
No thank you.
Yeah.
And it's just things like that as well. What I'm curious to know about as well, because you're kind of putting yourself in danger a little bit by being with people, because I guess in certain states you're allowed to carry, it's an open carry state, so people can have the right to bear arms and so on and so forth. But then sometimes there's things that the subjects will say that will come off as, I don't want to say unhinged, but it's kind of scary. I think the biggest one is in episode 3 with Johnny and Andy, where I think is it Johnny, the younger gentleman?
Yeah.
Yeah, he actually comes off as quite scary at times, and I think there's a lot that kind of he says a lot that kind of explains a lot to what's happening. How do you guys, because you're still got the camera, you're capturing all of this, but in the back of your mind, are you still assessing the danger that's happening and how you sort of want to step away from it just in case it gets a bit too heated?
Yeah, I go ahead, Dylan. You're about to say
No,
something?
I know. I think that, to what Harrison was saying, I think that like there's an element of danger to our show, partly because our show ultimately is about conflict. So we knew going into it that we were essentially putting ourselves in the crossfire between two people who were incredibly frustrated with each other. So we sort of knew going into it that like that's kind of what we were signing up for. I think that we never really I never felt like we were ever in any physical harm. Like, I think maybe when, Victoria had the loaded gun, I think at that moment I was like, if anything were to happen, it would be because it was an accident. Like, she accidentally dropped it and it went off. But I never felt like the subjects themselves were ever going to hurt us or do anything again, violent against us, partly because, and maybe this is me just being presumptuous, but I think they really liked us. Like, I think we had a good relationship with them. And I think that they also like they appreciated being able to vent to us. And so I think they didn't want to lose that. And they built trust with us, we built trust with them. I think with the Johnny situation, I think he's part of how he speaks is in these very kind of, he can be very hyperbolic, and also he's very aware of like he was very one of the most like aware of the power dynamics of a film set I think we've ever. He was the most aware that like he had sometimes more power over us than we did over him, even though we were documenting him. So he was constantly saying and doing things to try to flip the sort of the power arrangement on us by, either kind of these vague sort of threats, or at one point it's not in the thing, but at one point he took out his own camera and started filming us and like basically being like, okay, now I'm going to interview you. So there was always like with Johnny specifically, there was kind of this, like push and pull with him that I think is also just part of his personality. And I think because we got to know him, I don't think we ever felt like we didn't necessarily believe that he would ever do any of the things that he was sort of vaguely threatening. I think it was like a little concerning. And like that night, we definitely were like a little anxious as we were going to bed. But, I think for the most part, the danger really kind of is based in the core concept of the show, which is like people in conflict who you don't know totally what they're capable of doing, and what they say versus what they do. And But in terms of us personally, like, I don't think I ever felt like I was ever like physically so much in danger.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I feel like once you I think going off of what you were just saying, Dylan, like everybody that we filmed with also like wants us to be there. And so, there's like a mutual kind of like respect of, they wanted us there and they wanted to talk about their problem and they wanted to talk about this thing that no one in their life wants to talk about with them. And so I think we always were like, none of the people that we're filming with directly are ever gonna hurt us because like, they like us, and I think we also chose people that we knew, there's an element of danger in just inherently being in the middle of these things, but like, we didn't choose anyone where we were like, oh man, we might like they might snap, like totally turn on us or snap
Totally.
at us. Because it's also hard when you're making the show. There are a lot of moments where, for a lot of different reasons, we filmed stories that didn't end up working or one person backed out or like, so there's like, we got really sensitive to making sure, we could finish a story, and making sure we had that trust so that we could really complete an episode, because it becomes such a time investment that like we almost can't afford the flippancy or something, of people. So yeah.
I guess as well that like because you're there building relationships, and I as well like once people start talking about themselves and you're giving them that platform, they will what's it called? They'll kind of take it and run with it. It's a bit
Yeah.
like me now with you guys talking about your show,
Mhm.
but it's just one of those things. And I think as well that like people get more and more comfortable around you, and if you're being respectful as well, it will allow them to open up more and talk more about what's going on. But yeah, it's like some of the things that they say, you kind of, yeah, I'm amazed that they would even say that. I think it's again in episode 3 where uh, one of them says about their friend peeing in a cup or getting pee in a cup, and it's like you should definitely not have said that.
Yeah,
But, yeah.
definitely. Yeah, I know. It's funny. I think that like, people get very used to us and used to our cameras and they get just like, yeah, I mean, like one of the major, we love people who are not shameful about anything, and that are open about, every part of their life. That's like part of the fun with our show and with documentary. And so, we're also choosing people from the beginning that we're like, we feel an openness to how they talk and an openness to so much in their life. And we're like, they're going to give us like a full painting, the full picture of what who they are, because it's sort of the worst when somebody is like, doesn't want to reveal much about them or their situation, or it just doesn't work for us.
Yeah, and I think there's something I really envy about a lot of our subjects' ability to be just like 100% themselves and not like this kind of unbridled, like there's like a freedom that a lot of our subjects have to just like say and do what they want. Like there's very little between their desires and their actions. And I really admire that because I think there's like there's something incredibly energizing and freeing about that way of life. It also can, there's also the whole sort of part of it that the the social contract where you can't always do what you want because it might come at the cost, might affect the people around you. But I will say I think part of it is like there's a part that I kind of envy about the way a lot of our neighbors and a lot of our subjects just are so honest and open about exactly what they want. And I think it's what makes them interesting people. And I think it's what makes them people that people, vicariously like to watch, because I think everyone a little bit wants to be able to be a little bit more free or a little bit more honest than they actually are. So I think there's like something there too where I really admire that about the people that we film with.
I think in a way as well that like like during COVID we had a lot of these sort of crazy documentaries like Tiger King, for example. And in a way you could tell people were playing characters. There was like one of the guys, they went to where is it? I think it's Florida, and he's just all in like biker leather whilst the guy who's working is like topless sweating. And it's like you're definitely playing a character because no normal person would be wearing so much leather in this heat, no matter what. But also I think as well, it kind of, I don't know, just you allow people to talk, you allow people to sort of get their point across. And then also it's like, it's interesting because of like how far they want to go to actually win or to really push through what they think is right. And then somebody else would say, no, it's not right. And
Yeah.
I don't know. It just seems like you do have people who could be absolute pain in the backside, but it's just also, we all have to occupy the same space and we have to all find a way to get along somehow. But sometimes it just doesn't work. I think the best way is just to ignore people. That's it. You just don't say hello. And that's it.
Yeah,
I know.
It's hard. It's definitely like yeah, I think it definitely changes the way that you view your neighbors, and I think for us even like it is funny, like going off of what you were saying, Dylan, like there is something very just admirable about seeing people go so hard, and really fight for something they believe in. And there's something that's really cathartic, I think, especially in our show when the pair of neighbors, they haven't talked to each other in a long time, and they spend a lot of time talking to us about each other, and then when they finally get to talk to each other and they just sort of like let it all out at one another, like I feel like I've had many dreams or nightmares in my life where I'm like confronting people that I are maybe not in my life anymore, or like they're just for many reasons, you have like, I've had dreams like that. And so sometimes those scenes that we film, to me, they feel cathartic or something, because it's like you're watching these people they're just letting it all out finally at each other. And there's something good about that.
I also think too, part of the thing about, because I think you're right that like Robert, about the whole sort of issue, or like the sad potential truth that maybe your best relationship with your neighbor is one where you're not super friendly with them or but I think maybe what it really is it's you don't want anything from them, or you're not looking at the relationship in a way where you want either them to like you or you want them to agree with you, or it's kind of this like respect that comes with understanding that this person is not an extension of your life. They're not within your control, and you're not going to be able to totally understand everything that they do and why they do it. They're someone that is like, there's someone that you don't have any control over. And I think that there's a kind of a respect that comes with that like, this is someone who you can't control and will never fully understand. They're not like a family member. They're not like a spouse. And there's some sort of interesting middle ground where you can really respect a fellow neighbor, but also kind of respect the fact that there's someone that like you'll never fully understand. You can't control. You can't, there's this kind of interesting middle ground that then allows, like, if something bad happens, or if you need someone, need them to, you can rely on them because there's an understanding, but you don't need anything from them. I feel like that's something that we've experienced a lot, is like some of these neighbors in some ways were friends, but they also really needed things from each other. Like they were projecting a lot onto what the relationship needed to fulfill for them. And I think putting that amount of pressure on a neighbor relationship is not a good idea.
Yeah, I think as well, like sometimes as neighbors, you're just two ships in the night until somebody knocks on your door and they don't want to borrow some sugar or some milk, for example, like back in the day. I think now it's more, I'm going to be away, can you pick my bins out? And you think, yeah, sure.
Totally.
All of 30 seconds to do it. And I'll need you to do it again for me at some point.
Totally.
I think my parents do that for their neighbor, and I think in return they get their newspaper as well. So it's a win-win.
Win-win.
But it's also, you're right, that like maybe just projecting too much to the point where you just need to sit down and have a conversation and put that water under the bridge, or you just say we're going to live our separate lives and that's it. And
that's it. Yeah.
you know, I think you see that with like Joanne and Steve. There's, I don't know, there's a really weird, like not weird, but it's like a different dynamic of like how they're telling their story, with Steve saying about Joanne helped him a lot when he broke up with his girlfriend or wife, and I think Steve probably relied on them too much to then, that's why it created so much animosity. It was kind of like, oh, you know, Steve's back again. It's like that kid, the kid that you thought had moved out, is kind of coming back every day and bringing their laundry and whatnot. It's like that sort of stuff.
Yeah, as if you give a mouse a cookie kind of scenario.
Yeah, exactly. I would love to talk about structure of the show, because 5 episodes you focus on 2 different stories, and then the last episode you focus on one story. How did that idea come about, and how did you guys wanted to play with the structure? Was there any time that you wanted to maybe extend the series longer so each subject had a whole episode, or was it always let's stick it to an episode minus number 6?
You know, I think that like we were always kind of, I think every time that we were editing a story, we always were entertaining the idea of like, could this be a full episode, you know, this story? And I think that like just the way that the stories, you know, unfolded, and the time that we had to film them, I think that like the and with to ensure the kind of like high velocity pacing we wanted and all those things, I think it just boiled down to that being the best, you know, container for and duration for those stories. But I think we always were from the beginning just thinking about the finale, and we were like, it would just be amazing to we knew that we wanted to depart in structure somehow. We knew that we wanted to feel like bigger. We knew that it just had to like kind of say something more about what it means to be a neighbor, and our, you know, it just had to do something different to leave people, you know, wanting more. So I think that was very conscious. And then we also you know, working on the show is interesting because you like, you know, we follow a lot of different threads that don't end up panning out, you know. And so one of the threads that we had investigated very early on was nudist communities and like tensions within them between neighbors for different reasons. Because I think we're always fascinated by people that don't get along in places that they, you know, kind of like utopias or places that they should. So I think we were very fascinated by the nudist stuff, but the stories that we filmed there ended up not panning out. And Harley Shaw, our casting director, had early on spoke to this guy Danny, who's in he's, you know, he's the subject of the final episode. He had reached out through a Craigslist ad like right in the beginning of casting, basically describing his situation. And I think when we were getting towards a time where we were like, you know, we need to start thinking of a finale, I think Harley just reached back out to Danny to see how he was doing, and you know, he was very interested in going to a nudist community and escaping his life that he had in San Diego. And I think all of that kind of research kind of just, you know, perfectly came together for that.
Generally speaking, structurally, I think we really wanted, I think, you know, we consider the series a doc series, and we consider, you know, the process to be anchored in like a documentary process. I think that there was something about some of the other kind of unscripted shows on television that we thought were kind of interesting in the way they're episodic, and oftentimes they do a pairing of 2 different stories and you watch them kind of happen in real time and you cut back and forth. And we felt like that was a structure that we could comfortably teach our audience and that they would come to expect, and know that, okay, so every time I watch a neighbor episode, there'll be 2 episodes that'll bounce back and forth between. And I think we wanted to really make it feel like a show, like a real TV show that had like a very reliable and consistent format. And it also allowed us in the edit to like play back and forth between the different stories and cut at different moments where there maybe was something similar happening. You could kind of mirror, and it also allowed us to keep things moving really quickly. And I think that in the 5th episode, we introduced kind of like a neighbor story within a neighbor story, like a third neighbor. And I think we did that because we thought that was like an interesting way to start to push the format a little bit, but it also was a little bit of a primer for the last episode to be like, hey, we're starting to push the boundaries of what this format is that we've set up, this pattern that you've gotten used to, you know. And then in the last episode, we just do one. And I think we're like, I think predominantly we like the comfort that the show has in its format. But I also think with that comfort and with that learned understanding, it gives us the ability to occasionally push push the boundaries of what that format can be in a way that's really like fun for our audience, because they ultimately are in on it. Like they know they have an expectation, and then we get to play with that and subvert it, which I think is fun, you know.
I think as well, it allows as an audience not to have like a moment to breathe in between the stories, and that it cuts at the right time, that you kind of want just enough, but then you need to go back to the other stories as well, and just how you can really sort of play up the tension as well. And I wouldn't say cheat, but you kind of, yeah, it's like you want to keep if you want the story to continue, you need to keep watching and let's find out how it concludes.
Yeah, and I think, we've heard a lot from people who like, oh, I'd love to know more about the gate issue, or I'd like to, oh, I wish I could have spent more time in the courtroom, and I think I totally understand that desire, but I think, we've been mired in neighbor drama for years now, and we can like comfortably say that you think you want that, but like you start hearing and you start getting into the the get mired in the details, and it becomes immediately not interesting and confusing and boring. So I think we're always riding that line of providing just enough information, but also not getting too in the weeds to a point where you lose focus or interest in what's going on. And that's like a big challenge of the show. And our editors, Dustin, Kima, and Nick, they've got really good at knowing just the right amount of information that we need to make sure people understand what's going on, but that we're not getting too much in the weeds.
And again, it's a fine balance, and having those editors know even their shorthand and sort of understanding what you guys want helps so much in the long run, and also in the way that you want to tell the story, but what you want to tell and what's like enough between the two of them, between the two storylines minus the last episode, in how it goes. I've got 2 more questions for you guys. So for my penultimate question, you're quite involved in the hearings or filming in courts. This is mainly just for myself, but what are the logistics and like legalities around stuff like that? Because is it a case that both parties have to be open to it, or is it that the courts have to allow you to be able to film in there, or is there just a blanket rule that allows you to film in there or not?
You have to, it's very sensitive. For the most part, I think most civil cases are open to the public. That I think can change sometimes. But you have to apply to film inside of a courtroom, and the judge has to approve it. And there were times where the judge did approve it, and there were times where the judge didn't. And so it really is up to the judge per case of how open they are for their court, for that hearing to be documented. Most court hearings offer publicly available audio documentation. Some actually even provide video, but it's kind of a case by case basis, and it all just depends on the appetite that the judge has for there being form of documentation in the courtroom.
Okay, cool. I just always interested in that sort of stuff because there must be so many sort of loopholes. But if you get approval from the judge, then it should be okay. I guess if it's like a really high profile case, that probably wouldn't allow it at all, and just let people, you just find out at the end. I think there's one bit where I think you tried to sneak into a recording of, it's not Judge Judy, but it was like a similar sort of show.
Judy Justice, yeah.
Judy Justice, yes, thank you. And that was quite funny to see, but then also it's like, yeah, you can't come in. It's just like, damn, okay. We tried.
It's funny. I actually think it's easier to, if it's a higher profile case, I think it's actually easier to get into, record it or get documentation, because it's like, you could argue that it's kind of, what's it called?
It's a public interest, I think.
It's like a public interest, but like for our cases, like it's literally like what Dylan was saying, up to how the judge is feeling that day. And so you apply and you just like fingers crossed, you just dice roll if you're going to be able to have it in the show or not, And so that Judy Justice thing was just a poor attempt at that. But, we didn't really know what we were doing.
It's just basically, should we just chance it? See what happens?
Because we do that a lot in the show.
Just bum rush it.
Yeah, we go into many places. We try our luck many times filming a lot of things, and sometimes it works. So,
Yeah, and I again, it's one of those things, you don't ask, you don't get, you don't try it, you don't know
Right.
what's going to happen. You just need to, hope for the best. Look, as I said, like the worst thing that somebody could do is say no or call the police on you.
Right.
And then, hopefully you've got the right shoes on so you can run as fast as you can at that moment. I just want to hit you guys up with my final question. Is there anything that you guys want to mention that I haven't asked, or is there anything that you want to ask me?
Well, I'm curious, like from the UK perspective, because there were a lot of neighbor disputes that we saw when doing research for the show. Some of our favorite online on YouTube are all from the UK. And so, I know that there's been a lot of, I'm just curious how you think our show comes across. And I know you can't speak for all people in the UK, but how do you think our show comes off to a UK audience? How do you think it plays?
So at times it feels like really stereotypical America of like, wow, you've actually got people like that living there. But then on the flip side, as you're saying, when you're watching these UK disputes, you're probably thinking, wow, you've got people like that living in the UK. So it's like, the stereotype sort of like flips a little bit. I think when you're watching it, for me, it's the disputes and how like petty people can become and what they want to, like how they want to sort of win or come off as right. And then I also feel like sometimes you're there and it feels like somebody's just giving you too much info and being too open about certain things that you think, I know that you're comfortable with everybody, but there's also, it's just, I don't know, there's stuff that you kind of makes you feel like if I was in that room, I'd slowly be backing away to the exit because it just, I don't know, you just feel it, like the gut feeling of something's not right. But then also it's everyday life, isn't it, in a way?
Yeah.
These are normal people trying to go by normal days, having disputes over fences. I think I know people who've had disputes over fences and argue and go to court about, who actually, the fence was broken, who's on the boundary, who gets to fix it, why can't you fix it? No, it's not my boundary, and so on and so forth. Or something's not right on the planning permission. I enjoy the show. I think it's just fascinating to see, but I think there's also just interesting, like people and humans, and you kind of think as well, like, how would I react in that situation if, I don't know, especially like boundaries with like the grass, like how do you react to that? Because technically it's yours, but somebody's not accepting it. what do you do in the process? And also you live next door to them, so it's like you see you'll somehow interact every day with them, even if it's like by accident or if you try to avoid each other.
Totally.
Um,
Totally.
Hopefully
Yeah.
that answered your question.
It's a great answer.
No, it's a great answer. I
I'll
mean,
take
I
it.
think, yeah, I think there is something universal about neighbor disputes, and I haven't totally figured out what exactly it is, but I think there's enough to it that you can understand the mechanics, understand how the situation arose, but maybe how people respond or the language they use or the lives that they've lived could look totally different based on the UK or in India or in the US. But there is something there that does kind of tie everyone together, even if they come from totally different backgrounds and cultures.
Yeah, and you just sort of accept that like these are people's lives, and it's also so I think you have to understand is like people aren't going to change no matter how much you're going to push and push. People are just going to be stubborn and they won't change what they think is right or wrong, or what they think is doing is okay, even if it does seem a bit like on the edge of like not good.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
But yeah, Dylan, Harrison, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, man.
Robert. Thank you for having us, man.
Neighbours are streaming now on HBO and HBO Max in the UK. Go out and watch Dylan and Harrison's and their team's amazing work. Thank you again so much, guys.
Thanks so
Thank
much,
you.
man.
Cool. You guys take care, and yeah, we'll speak soon. Thank you again.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, dude.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.